Thank you so much for staying with us. Now, despite an optimal crude oil production capacity of 1.8 million barrels per day, Nigeria's 2022 OPEC average has hovered around 1.2 million barrels per day. Crude, as Nigeria's mainstay, accounts for over 90% of foreign earnings. But as a producing state, Nigeria is not refining, instead importing what it consumes. Now, from petrol to diesel, jet fuel, kerosene, or any other petrochemical, Nigeria continues to spend more on importation. In 2021 alone, the NNPC spent 100 billion naira on the rehabilitation of the nation's 4 refineries, but yet no success. Despite being a major source of revenue, the oil sector lags behind other sectors in terms of GDP contribution, as the sector only grew by 6.33% in the second quarter of 2022. According to experts, if implemented diligently, the Petroleum Industry Act, PIA, will help facilitate Nigeria's economic development by attracting and creating investment opportunities for local and international investors, as well as help boost Nigeria's production capacity. Now, for further analysis on this, we have Sumbo Badejoko, a public affairs analyst who joins us virtually. Thank you so much for joining us, Sumbo.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Now, apparently with a large potential for the production of, or rather for the refining of crude oil, Nigeria still imports oil. And of course, that has to do with a lot of issues as regards our refineries. For instance, let's look at the fact that we still spend so much on the rehabilitation and paying those who work at the refineries despite not getting any crude oil refined. What are your thoughts on all of these issues?
It's unfortunate we are still at this junction, despite the huge investments in the petroleum sector. And the only major problem that the sector is having is corruption. Corruption in high places, because a good number of individuals, highly placed individuals within and outside of the government, has built an economy around the petroleum resources. And they seem to have established a very strong cabal within the NNPC that is shortchanging the whole nation. And that is why we are still, even though we're supposed to be in surplus now, we are not even meeting up with our quota of OPEC as we speak. And unfortunately, again, despite the fact that we are an oil-producing nation, you said it in your intro, we do not have any functional refinery that's long before that the NNPC currently have, and that is rather unfortunate.
But let's look at the PIA itself, which of course is supposed to help with the oil production and also the implementation of all of the factors that have to do with our production capacity. What are the challenges? Why aren't we implementing it? It's become an act, it's a law. Why aren't we implementing the law?
After
all right, Sumbo Badejoko there. We have some audio issues, but of course we'll fix that. Talking about
NNPC, it has become a full-fledged company now. Not long, the government does not decide what happens there. So that is part of implementation. We have regulatory agencies that have now.
Okay, talking about some of the parts or some parts of the PIA.
Real results will take time. Real results will take time, because we currently do not have a functional refinery. And that still brings us to this issue of subsidy. And until the idea of subsidy regime goes
okay, some disruptions there. It's quite difficult to make sense of what you're saying because of the interruptions, and I think it's some network issues. But of course, we'll try to look into that as we continue the conversation, talking about Nigeria's crude oil production. What are the factors responsible for the lack of, the ability of Nigeria to meet up with the OPEC quota? Over time, Nigeria has been producing about 1.2 million barrels per day, as against the 1.8 million barrels per day that OPEC has put as the quota for Nigeria. Welcome back, Sumbo.
Thank you. I was actually saying that the implementation of the PIA has more to do with the current state of our refinery we've been able to implement to a certain extent because the NNPC is now a full-fledged limited company with its own board. And we have regulatory agencies replacing the PPPRA now. And of course, the regulatory power has been removed from the NNPC and given to those agencies. So that has given, that is a part of the implementation. But in terms of seeing real results of the implementation, I was saying that until we have functional refineries, which would ensure that whatsoever the NNPC is going to be selling locally has more of local inclusion, as well as other byproducts within the value chain are locally processed. As we speak now, we are importing every byproduct of the crude oil. We sell one product, which is the crude oil, out there, and we import about 10 other products independently. This is not good enough for our balance of trade, and it's affecting the forex value, and it's also not improving the economy. So the implementation would be determined by when the full implementation will go a long way, or will come into full effect when the refineries come up. Fortunately, first quarter of next year, we should have the Dangote refinery coming up. And by that time, according to the NNPC, we should have the Port Harcourt refineries too coming up. So by the time we have those two fully functional, and we allow the modulars to also operate, then the full implementation of the PIA can now be talked about. But for now, we are still a bit distant from the full implementation.
Yeah, of course, when the Dangote refinery comes into operation, there are potentialities when it comes to the production capacity of Nigeria. But wouldn't that be putting all of our eggs in one basket? I know you've talked about the fact that there is the potential of modular refineries coming up and all of that. But we've been talking about modular refineries for ages now, but we've not seen any really come into operation.
Yes, by the end of second quarter of next year, the IPO of the NNPC would have been fully documented, and they will be enlisted in the stock exchange market. By the time investors come into the NNPC, the management will obviously change. And once the management changes, then you have private sectors, people who are coming in with big money to invest in the NNPC. Currently, it's still a property of the government, though privately managed. But by that time, some share value would have gotten away from the government, buy out into the private hands, and the private sector will now be fully running the company. What this will bring is that the asset of the NNPC will have to be revived. Otherwise, they will not be making maximum profit from the investment. So by the time the NNPC now revive the 4 refineries that they have, they ensure that all their depots, because those are part of the assets, are now functionally, are fully active. One, it would now enable them to compete favorably with Dangote that is coming up. And of course, by the time the market is flexible and the forces are determining the price, other players will now want to come into the sector because, one, this is a country of 200 million population. So, and we also have the potential for exports, especially within the neighboring country. Talk about Niger Republic, talk about Benin Republic, even the Cameroon. These are non-oil producing countries that Nigeria can also be exporting to. This will be the long-term goal for these investors that will come into the NNPC. But for now, we cannot conclude on anything. It's still a baby right now. We have to mature. Of course, the teething problem will set in. Those are the state that we are now. But by the time the first financial year is elapsed, then we'll now begin to see how they would publish their book, and people see how well they have fared within the 1 year, because their performance in the first year will go a long way in marketing their share value. So we'll be investors.
Well, let's look at the issue of oil theft. We know that even if we begin to refine this product, the oil theft issue also has to go away. We need to deal with it. For instance, there was a report that talked about Nigeria losing 400,000 barrels of oil to crude theft. And also, there's also a report that Nigeria is losing 6.132 billion gallons of oil to oil theft. How do we deal with all of these issues? We know that, yes, we need the refineries to work, but we also have to deal with the issue of oil theft.
Oil theft is closely linked to security. It's a form of security breach because we have military installations around our the corridor of the oil environment. And unfortunately, if these people have not been compromising, we would not be having the case of oil theft, because how can a whole vessel load of petroleum products would depart the shores of the country without the army and the navy knowing about it? So it's still part of security breach. By the time they put right peg in right poles, the security architecture is overhauled, probably bring in private security outfits who will not compromise, because the NNPC may be looking at that direction now as a private company. They will not be solely relying on the government.
Okay, talking about all of the issues around oil theft in Nigeria, which of course has been like resident evil, especially when it comes to Nigeria's oil and gas sector. And there have been reports that there are the culprits are those who should even be cautioning or be in charge of security when it comes to oil theft. Thank you for joining us again, Sumbo.
Yeah, I was saying that the issue of oil theft is a form of security breach, because within the oil corridor, you have the Navy there, you have Army officers there. If these people have not been compromising, it will be difficult for individuals to steal the crude and export. That how come a full vessel load of a crude product will leave the shores of the country without being detected by the Navy? So it means that some people form a syndicate that are highly placed, and of course the security institutions are complicit here, because they cannot tell us that they cannot secure the territorial integrity, especially when it comes to our coastal maritime boundaries, because these are the axes that the oil is being.
Okay, talking about the security apparatus around the crude oil theft, and some, there have been reports that some of these security agents are also culpable when it comes to crude oil theft. For instance, the 3 million capacity tanker or vessel rather that was nabbed in Equatorial Guinea recently. Thank you for joining us again. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yes, I'll let you land on your thoughts before we move the conversation further.
Yes, I was actually linking the oil theft to security breach that we have within the oil corridor: security institutions, Navy, and some Army officers around that axis. That if these people have not been compromising, it will be difficult for some group of individuals or syndicates or a cartel to be stealing this thing. There is heavy amount of conspiracy around that. But with the privatization of the NNPC, they will have to maybe look at the direction of having private security outfits manning that corridor, so that there will be, so that the issue of oil theft will be nipped in the bud. Until we do that, we cannot be, it will affect their own outputs, which will go a long way in affecting their balance at the end of the financial year.
You've mentioned the culpability of the security apparatus when it comes to protecting our oil resources. But there have also been allegations that even the federal government is involved in diversion of these oil resources and also allocating it to their own personal allies. What are your thoughts on this?
I wouldn't want to subscribe to the federal government who diverting to their allies, because the federal government is not involved in the running of it, is the NNPC. So you may have individuals.
But the president, sorry to butt in, but the president is the Minister of Petroleum.
Yes, the president is the Minister of Petroleum, but he doesn't run, he's not involved in the day-to-day running of it. you have a minister of state who answers. When was the last time that the minister ever granted any interview on the issue of petroleum? It is only the minister of state and the NNPC GMB. So those are the people that are involved. And if there will be a complicity, what is it called now? A conspiracy involving the government, it's going to be within this, among these individuals that I mentioned, not the presidency or the federal government. So the NNPC, we all know there's a cabal there that runs the syndicate who knows about all these things, and that's why it is difficult to track. But by the time private individual comes in, they will be interested in every single drop of oil that the NNPC is selling. And that's why it's a welcome, the PIA is a welcome development. But the full implementation and the results of the implementation will only take a while, but it's something that we will enjoy in the long run.
There's also the contract, the recent contract that was awarded, what's his name now? Who was awarded the contract for the protection of the pipelines. And we see stakeholders in that sector in the Niger Delta region saying that it was not properly done, especially when you look at the fact that they did not consult with stakeholders before awarding him the contract. And that has also generated a lot of controversies in that regard. We see some militants coming up saying that they are not going to allow that fly, and they are also going to cause more mayhem in that regard, which would also may lead to more losses in the crude oil resources in the country. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, the issue of the contract is just giving it a title. It's just money for the boys, because these militants have been, affecting the production, what is it called, the exploration process of the crude oil, and they have to look for a way to settle them. But I really don't believe in that approach. You cannot have some group of syndicates turning themselves to criminals because they have resources that is useful to the whole nation at their domain, and the next thing is to build an economy around this. And that's why you see some other groups coming up, because a particular group has been given the contract to secure the pipeline. Now, even with the contract, there is still a case of oil theft, because the pipeline being secured are the pipeline that supplies the, what is it called, the refined products to the depots, because they have been heavily vandalized, as well as the one that supplies the crude to the jetty where the vessels would have to load them. So all these are still subject a product of conspiracy. But when things are done the right way, and it will start with overhauling. Now that the NNPC is no longer going to be part of the government responsibility, it's going to go a long way in helping them to look inward on how to ensure that all these things are prevented. And if they will still maintain contracts with militants, then they will have to review it and ensure that it's not one group that they will just settle and leave the other group that will compromise the settlement that they're giving to the first. So they will have to ask them to maybe form a cooperative or something to ensure that everybody is settled once and will be able to produce enough to meet up with the OPEC quota.
I just hope we won't have a bigger issue on our hands, because I saw the scary-looking militants who were protesting, saying that the award shouldn't have been given to Tompolo, and that there are a lot of, unsaid things that went on, before that contract was awarded. But I hope that it would be resolved.
They just wanted their own money. They wanted their own money. Probably Tompolo has not been settling some of them, or some are not comfortable with the quota they are getting, so they want more. It's all due to corruption. And these are byproduct of government negligence of that environment over the years, because the environment is heavily polluted. Even the cleanup that is going on in Ogodiland, you see the slow pace at which is being carried out. And these are some of the things, environmental degradation. They've lost their fishing ports. They've lost some of their farmlands. And they must survive. So you can't continue to throw money around. You need to spend some of this money to give them real development. And that is what they want as a people. And until you begin to do that, you will not be able to separate the masses from this militant, because for now, everybody seems to be conniving against the government.
Well, let's wrap this up by looking at how Nigeria can leverage on its potential, especially when it comes to the fact that we have the largest proven gas reserves in Africa and the 9th largest in the world, with over 200 trillion cubic of natural gas, and that was as at 2018, and unproven reserves of 600 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. How do we leverage on all of these potentialities?
Well, the government is trying to improve the capacity of the NNLG. They need to be fast with that, and they need to know we cannot rely on just one company to be in charge of our gas assets. So we need to set up more, fully liberalize that sector as well, so that the full potential can be actualized. But for now, we are limited to the NNLG, which is a joint corporation. It doesn't have the kind of problem that the NNPC is having anyway, because the multinational oil companies are part of the management. But they need to expand or create avenue for other outfits to come up so that we can harness the full potential. Having one, the issue of monopoly is one problem that is affecting this nation. Probably virtually all the key government institutions are monopolized, and that's why they are having problem managing them, because the responsibility they have to take care of is so massive that they need to be unbundled or decentralized so that there will be efficiency in the management. So with the gas, for us to achieve our full potential, we need to spread the responsibility that the one company is having to others. Probably NNPC will be looking at that direction now that they are fully privatized, because from what the group CEO is saying, he seems to be so optimistic that the company will run and will not disappoint. And whatever achievement that Aramco of Saudi Arabia is having, he is assuring that Nigeria too will have something similar, if not better. Aramco is having.
All right, that's a fine place to leave it. Thank you so much for the insights on the show this morning, Tumbo Badijoko, Public Affairs Analyst.
Thank you for having me.
All right, have a good day. Well, still to come after the break, road transport sector recorded the highest growth rate in the Nigerian economy in the second quarter of 2022 with a 56.38% growth rate, the highest quarterly growth rate recorded in the sector since the second quarter of 2021. That's at 92.38%. Well, this is our focus next as we take a closer look at the factors responsible for the surge in growth despite the spate of insecurity in the country. We'll be right back.